Hey everybody, KC here. So, one of the advantages of the current environment where we're sort of like throwing out the old playbook and trying different things is that I've been engaging in a series of conversations with people I like, really smart people from around the industry, not just in the industry, but working around the periphery of the industry. Just spend some time with them. They're at home, I'm at home. There's a different sort of feel in the air, right? So people are sort of willing to spend some time having extended conversations about their business, the business, and the situation in which so many of us find ourselves. So I've been doing these morning newsbeat in conversation pieces, and this week I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that Cathy Burns, who's the CEO of the Produce Marketing Association, formerly of Hannaford, formerly at Food Lion, I've known Cathy for years. She agreed to spend some time with me via Zoom, talking about what's going on in the produce business, what's going on in the culture, and the kinds of challenges and opportunities uh, that the industry finds right in front of it and that it has to deal with. I thought it was an interesting and entertaining conversation. I hope you feel the same way. Enjoy. Well, Cathy, welcome to Morning Newsbeat. Thrilled to have you. First things first, how are you? That's, I think, really important. Everybody you talk to these days, somebody knows somebody who's been infected. So how you doing, first of all?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, Kevin. It's always great to see you. I'm healthy, and the family is healthy, and our staff is healthy, and that's quite a blessing right now. So I think about that every day. Actually, when people ask you how you are, it used to be a throwaway line like good or fine, okay. I'm healthy.
Yeah. It must be. I'm sure for you, it's the same as it is for me, which is you used to be on the road. You travel more than I travel. It must be very weird not being on a plane, not going someplace and your family probably looks at you and goes, "What are you still doing here?"
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, not having the ability to travel and quite frankly, visit members has been a huge change for me. I mean, I used to use plane time to catch up on things and to think. I'm not one of those people that signs on to the internet when I'm in the sky. So now I've found that my plane time is either first thing in the morning when I take a walk or in the evening after I log off. That's my thinking time now, plane time.
A friend of mine was telling me that he had read a study about how a lot of CEOs are finding that this time, because they're at home, they're not in the office, and there's in some ways fewer distractions, at least organizationally, the minutia of the business.
Right.
They're actually finding more time to think, to try and focus on innovation to a degree that maybe they didn't before. It's just giving them a little more room, and quite frankly, the impetus, because this is upsetting so much of traditional business models. Are you finding that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's a little more time. I'm not sure I gained a lot of time over the last 6 weeks, but certainly the frame has shifted. Certainly over the last 3 years at PMA, we've done a lot of work to foster a mindset of innovation and really how new ideas can be delivered to members and the produce and floral community at large. What's interesting is the pandemic has actually caused us to accelerate and use adoption of some technology tools that we were already using on a small scale, and all companies are experiencing this, online meeting technologies certainly, and finding a way to make those more member facing and more fluid. Certainly another example of that is our virtual town hall series that we have every Wednesday at noon. So there's time to think about innovation, and some of the innovations we were thinking about have now been moved up, and we're escalating the execution of some of those, Kevin, for sure.
One of the things that Tom Furphy has made this point here is that the changes that we're seeing at every level of the business, especially in e-commerce, but also organizationally, a lot of this stuff was going to happen anyway. It was just 3 or 4 years out, and even companies like Amazon were thinking 2 years out. It even caught them unawares because it was further even than they were thinking, or at least prepared to kind of deliver on whatever the value proposition happens to be. I think that's a really enormous challenge for businesses, whether you're an association, a retailer, a supplier, is to figure out, okay, we're playing catch up, but at some point when things get, I even hate to use the word normal, but when things sort of relax a little bit and you look around and say, all right, which things do I keep? Which things do I throw out? I mean, which things do I invest in?
Yeah.
How do I place my bets? That's, I think, going to be a non-health issue related challenge for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I think, obviously prioritization and communication is key in that. And things that we had in our business plan for this year, some have been thrown out. Things we've had in our business plan for next year, as I said earlier, have been accelerated. And what is the most value, meeting the members where they are, just like consumers, understanding what is the biggest value proposition we can deliver against. And there may be things that we used to do, and I know this is always hard to say no to things or stop doing things. Nothing like a good crisis to force those choices to happen, and putting your most valuable resources in an area where you can create the most value. We've said, well, we will not be the same PMA that we were 6 weeks ago, especially based on how we're interacting with our members and the content we're delivering. This same is true for retail.
So what are your members telling you? What are they, what are their main concerns? I'm sure they're vast, but
they are.
What are the things that when you listen to them, you start to see some themes emerging?
Yeah, so, we represent the whole supply chain. So you're right. I'm hearing a myriad of stories, and different members are in different places. Economic survival is top of mind for many of them. That said, there are some prospering, while others, like food service, obviously, and floral, have suffered really due to the changing buying habits and hopefully temporary business closures, obviously brought on by social distancing practices. So right now, everyone is focused on maintaining the relationships they have with their suppliers and their consumers. Again, meeting the consumers where they are, getting innovative and agile in terms of how do you deliver against those. Certainly uncertainty in the supply chain, as think about a farmer, a grower, forecasting demand for late summer. How do you forecast demand for late summer without solid projections? So as we've talked, and you've talked about this a lot, Kevin, is the relationship between the buyers and the sellers, and the transparency that needs to happen, the co-creation that needs to happen, the innovation that needs to happen, the restructuring that needs to happen of people's businesses. That communication between buyers and sellers in terms of really understanding what the universe may look like, because we're making decisions today on what we plant today to harvest at the end of summer. And certainly strong retail promotions will help. I know that's been a challenge for retailers. It's just a matter of, quite frankly, getting product on the shelf. This could be a really big summer as we head into the stone fruit season, and for locally grown programs in retail stores. So there's a lot of concerns on the minds of members. But I think now more than ever, breaking through any silos that happen across the supply chain, coming together to create solutions to ultimately grow a healthier world, is what our industry does best. It's the core of who we are.
So you said a second ago, you said that they're trying to figure out ways to be innovative.
Yeah.
So what does innovation look like? I mean, when give me an example of what that means.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest example right now is what's happening between retail and food service. And if you think about growers that once had business, and in some cases, 50% of their business going to food service operators, and all of a sudden overnight that those doors are closed. So they have product, retail needs it, food service distributors have the logistics and infrastructure. So early on, we started matching up growers with, retailers with food service operators, just to help with the infrastructure, whether it was staffing for retail organizations, transportation, logistics, product that was sitting in food service distributors' warehouses. If it was in the right pack, or certainly in a bulk form, that could then be translated over into the retail space. So what will be interesting, Kevin, on the other side of this is what relationships last for the long term. There's already been a blend between food service and retail happening over the past several years. And is there an opportunity to capitalize on that going forward? Just being more agile and using those resources. especially if we get into a time of crisis. Are retailers going to put a crisis plan in place so that if something happened to a different sector in the supply chain, they could call on third-party providers or other suppliers to ensure that flow of product is happening every day? So that's an example of that, yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, everybody talked about grocerants, you know, in terms of groceries getting into the restaurant business, but we've clearly seen an example of where it's going the other way as well. That it's going to be restaurant markets, right? Restaurants have decided that that's a way to do it. And it's not hard to imagine if there were a restaurant that was a vegan or a vegetarian restaurant, having a robust, in addition to having a maybe less sit-down space than they traditionally had because of the challenges created by the pandemic and physical distancing, but also having a marketplace where you can buy cauliflower, you can buy, and maybe even you could do, I mean, they've got chefs, they could do cooking lessons. It's not hard to imagine different kinds of hybrids breaking out of this that could totally change in markets where appropriate how people acquire food, whether it's packet product, meat, or fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, it's very likely that kind of this channel blurring between food service and grocery will result in some sustained changes in consumer behavior, and retailers, no matter what format, will have to adjust to meet those changes. I mean, meal kits are sold in grocery stores and retail establishments, so it's not a foreign concept already. But I don't know if restaurants offering limited SKUs of traditional grocery items will be competition for traditional grocers. I see these operations maybe as even having stronger competition from C-stores that is kind of quick in and out. But you know, at the end of the day, these alternative formats will only survive, and I would say thrive, if they execute consistently on a memorable and fulfilling consumer experience. I mean, at some point, whatever, as you said, this new normal is going to be, and how social distancing plays into it, and what kind of the rules of engagement are, I still strongly believe the consumer is going to come back to I want a memorable, fulfilling, and safe experience.
Of course, the wild card in all this is the economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're looking at 20 to 25 and maybe 30% unemployment, and the impact that's going to have on people's ability to spend money anywhere.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's got to be another concern that a lot of your members have.
Oh, no question. I mean, you know, if you think about their own prosperity, and we've also seen a fair amount of SKU rationalization happening both at retail and food service. Again, I think, you know, new rules of engagement, and not that suppliers and retailers and food service operators weren't talking already, but, you know, the opportunity for them to co-create what that future looks like, because we have heard from both retailers and food service operators, they're going to take a hard look at their SKUs and ensure that they obviously have the best-selling SKUs, the ones the consumers want the most, but also ensure that it flows through the supply chain. So again, these aren't new concepts. SKU rationalization has been around forever. It just has a different meaning and sense of urgency now, especially as people, I mean, it's part of resilience, right? I mean, part of being resilient is to ensure that you have an efficient supply chain and an efficient system, and leveraging technology, and all of that is getting accelerated right now. And I can't stress enough the communication and partnerships that are happening between buyers and sellers to figure this out together.
I mean, you're right. SKU rationalization has been around forever. A lot more companies talk about editing their selection than actually get it done to any meaningful degree. I mean, I've been pontificating. I got a soapbox. I get to pontificate. That, you know, one of the things I think that ought to come out of this, and it's not just in the produce side, and maybe, in fact, it might be less so on the produce side than other categories, but you come out of retail. So is that, you know, how many stores really need 45,000 SKUs?
Right.
Right? I mean, Could you knock that down to 4,500 and not lose a single customer? Probably. Could you knock it down to 450? You know, I don't know. I mean, to me, and what's gotten me thinking about this is, you know, local retailer for me here in Connecticut is Stu Leonard's, right?
Mm-hmm,
He's
mm-hmm.
killing it. He is absolutely killing it. The store is fully stocked all the time.
Yep,
It is as bustling as you can be when people have to have 6 feet in between them.
yep.
I mean, they're doing an outstanding job. They would look good in the best of times, and they look so. In this time, and he's got 1,200 SKUs,
Mm.
right? And,
Yep.
you know, and they're killing it. And I keep thinking to myself, there's a model there, and he's not an upscale, you know, high price retailer. I mean, he's not always the cheapest on everything, but he is not. He is. There's a lot of values in that store, so this is not an upscale play. Can actually be a play that's attractive to people who are on limited incomes or whatever it happens to be. And I keep thinking, man, that is. But by the way, one of the places he's most robust is in produce.
Produce, exactly.
That's where you can differentiate yourself from Amazon and companies that are less adept at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, no question, most retailers at the center of their bullseye of their strategy is produce. You can differentiate in produce: quality, variety, experience, sampling, atmosphere, signage, recipes. I mean, there is no question that, you know, formats differentiate on that. What gives me hope as it relates to SKU rationalization, as it relates to produce, is if one thing purchasing patterns in e-commerce have shown is there's a subset of consumers who lack the confidence, ability, or both in their cooking skills. So those suppliers and retailers that can really help educate, provide confidence, and inspire consumers to cook are likely to, I think, have lasting relationships once we're on the other side of this. So things like garlic, things like jicama, things that normally, I mean, some retailers are selling out of these products because now consumers have the time, but mostly the time, and they don't have access to go out to eat as often. Certainly they're doing curbside and pickup and delivery, but now they're exploring cooking, and I'm hopeful that they'll continue that at some level, which will argue against broad swaths of SKU rationalization if we can create demand for that product. Now, having said all that, I'm really looking forward to Meals Out when the day comes.
I was talking to a friend of mine last night whose son is vegetarian,
Yep.
maybe vegan. Doesn't, for the sake of the story, it doesn't matter. And he was saying he was going to make his son a cauliflower steak.
Yep.
And I said, what the hell's a cauliflower steak? I mean, and I'm not unfamiliar with food. I cook.
Yep.
I didn't know what this was. And he said, oh, look it up. It's great. And he explained how to make it. I'm going, that sounds really good. But nobody is, I mean, there's a single item opportunity that I'll bet you a lot of people out there don't know what cauliflower steak is or how to cook it. And, you know, right. He said it's easy. It's a grill, a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper, a little garlic, boom, you're done. It's, you know, well, that sounds great. But there's an opportunity just with one item to create usage that people didn't even think of. And you wouldn't have to be a vegetarian or vegan to like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And think about the plant-based diet craze. We are the original plant-based diet, fruits and vegetables. So the opportunity to educate consumers on how to cook and use them, like a cauliflower steak or a cauliflower pizza, or things that have happened with kale and avocados. And I mean, we could go on and on about all the opportunities. That's another way that innovation can certainly be embraced across our industry. Let's look for other ways to take these incredible products and prepare them and ultimately drive demand and consumption for the long term, which is critically important always, Kevin. But if you think about a time when you need to build your immunity system, which, oh, by the way, fruits and vegetables do, it's now. You should be doing it every day, but now is the opportunity to build up those systems. And what's been so frustrating, quite frankly, and the narrative that we've been working on hard, is that there's a concern from consumers today, even around buying fruits and vegetables. Really smart people are washing their fruits and vegetables in bleach water and detergents, soaps.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing worse that will make you sick.
Some people are
Um,
suggesting you should actually ingest that stuff.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's that's insane. The same practices that you used pre-pandemic, you should be using right now. Wash your hands, rinse your fruits and vegetables in water only. So if you think about, we're overcoming that narrative, both in the media, quite frankly, mainstream media, and with influencers. And so to fight that battle, to ensure that people just have trust to consume and eat our products, to ultimately make them healthy, to fight against any virus. I mean, that's our story to tell.
Well, listen, I've always thought that education and transparency are like the two building blocks of any solid program, any program anywhere in the supermarket, quite frankly, but especially in places like produce where there is a lack of knowledge, right? And the more you expose people to stuff, the better off you are. So let me ask you a couple of other questions. E-commerce, always, people always said, it's the last thing people are going to buy online is produce. Well, that's clearly been challenged over the last couple of months. What kind of challenges are your members finding with that?
So that's a great question. Our whole virtual town hall on Wednesday focused on e-commerce. And two big concerns that consumers have as it relates to e-commerce. One, right now, they just want access to food. It's not even a concern. You've heard the stories. People are getting up in the middle of the night to place an online order just to have access to food. And the other one I just spoke about is really around produce safety, making sure that whatever product they get delivered to their home is safe. And as I mentioned, we're actively addressing the produce safety concerns. We've launched a consumer-centric campaign really designed to ensure shoppers know that fruits and vegetables are available, one, and safe during this crisis. It's called Joy of Fresh, which actually the irony in that, as we're all sheltered in place, isn't that kind of one of the last joys we have left, is to obviously being with family, but to experience the joy of eating fresh fruits and vegetables. So we want to bring the joy of that to everyone in everyone's homes. But having said that, one vulnerability we clearly see in some online models is the in-store shoppers aren't always aware of how to kind of properly substitute products, specifically produce items, based on availability. You talked about training, Kevin. This is it. I mean, the retailers who offer in-house shopping and delivery programs certainly need to make sure these personnel, especially if they're store associates, know how to make substitution. I mean, the last thing you want to do is order the ingredients for broccoli soup and broccoli doesn't show up, yams show up or something along those lines. So that's critically important. I mentioned earlier that it definitely is highlighted that consumers, at least right now, are interested in improving their cooking skills and trying new products and new recipes. I think that's a really great opportunity for retailers in the future. Again, digitally providing recipes, providing cooking tips, providing nutritional information, all of that will be critically important. And like always, the biggest challenge is the last mile. So, you can have the best suppliers, the best distribution centers, the best handling at store level. And what everyone is racing to the finish is, how do we continue to improve the last mile when it actually goes to the consumer's home? That's where I think there's some opportunity for innovation and creativity. I don't have the answer, but I promise you, retailers are thinking about how do we even get better at delivering great product to the consumer.
I mean, it's interesting, some of the things you're talking about, and it's less of an issue now because grocers are making sales are coming in hands over fist, right? But all the things you're talking about in terms of education, in terms of picking, in terms of all that stuff, that all costs money.
It does.
And even in the best of times, retailers are loath to spend money. I mean, they're if you're a produce department manager, or you're a store manager, or you're a produce director or a CEO, you're often judged based on how low you can get your labor factor, right? And that works in direct opposition to what you're describing. And what you're describing, I agree with 1,000%.
Yep.
But the reality in the industry is that it doesn't play on the balance sheet the way they necessarily want it to play the balance sheet.
Yeah, and it's certainly more difficult for publicly held companies than privately held companies. But at the end of the day, if you can show a return for any type of investment, that's and increase shareholder value by doing that. As we talked about earlier, produce tends to be in the bullseye of any go-to-market strategy for a retailer. They want to win on produce. So both in terms of quality, variety, experience, and when you have more consumers potentially cooking than they have in the past, those retailers that might want to invest just a little bit more out of the gate to keep that consumer going, I think, produce also has strong margins. So you want any basket that contains produce is going to be a bigger basket. So there's an economic reason on why you would want consumers to frequent your produce department more. And it has some nice financial return. And I get it. I get the investment side of it because labor's expensive, sampling can be expensive. And so you need to look at it holistically. But I'm optimistic that we will continue to drive consumption of fruits and vegetables and create that demand through the whole system. Again, it's the joy of fresh.
Well, and there's always been a tension between managing for the next quarterly results and leading for the future. And that's a very different and much longer conversation we can have another time. What about
before you go off that, people used to say, how long were you, obviously I spent 20 years at Hannaford. They'd say, how long were you at Food Lion? I said 39 quarters. Because that is the truth. Every 13 weeks you're out talking to the analysts, talking about what just happened and then your projections on what's going forward. But by the way,
analysts don't necessarily see the subtlety of, oh no, our labor factor in produce went up by 0.5%, but, and they go, but again, a much longer conversation for another time. What about supply chain issues in terms of things? I mean, clearly there's lots of issues, in terms of that. And also, by the way, the supplier members, I mean, there's immigration issues happening right now. I mean, that's got to be affecting. I mean, forget what they're going to plant, what they're going to harvest it. Are they going to have enough people to harvest it?
Yeah.
And it's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so as I mentioned before.
Oi.
Oi, exactly. As I mentioned before, floral and food service operators, food service distributors too, took huge losses, obviously, during the onset of the pandemic. Floral actually has started to return. And what's great about floral is they're looking forward to Mother's Day as an opportunity to regain sales and honestly share of mind for grocery shoppers. Some of the retailers actually had to close down their floral departments just because they couldn't handle what was happening in grocery, certainly meat and produce. And what's nice is I think all floral departments have reopened across the US. Our latest consumer retail study actually found produce sales at retail have remained highly elevated and we just looked at data during the week of April 12th. So that's the most recent data I've seen. While the demand for food service obviously is far below normal levels. So, sales for the first week of April also we need to take into account were likely influenced. We had an earlier Easter this year and a higher everyday demand that's literally driving a new baseline that still sits well above kind of the old normal for retail. But it's a good question about imports. Import levels right now into the US for produce are fairly normal. Obviously Mexico is our big supplier this time of year, and product from south of the border seems to be flowing northward. So that's a good sign for those that lean into that. Interestingly, the G20 countries, all the major economies, signed a statement just Wednesday committing to keep borders open for trade during COVID-19, during the pandemic. So that's certainly good news. And so the other thing that I think about when I think about imports or I think about supply chain challenges, Kevin, is I'm really curious to see how consumer sentiments around packaging are going to evolve. If you think about, global sustainability and environmental concerns, which obviously are still critically important and part of our strategic plan, it felt as if we were moving towards less packaging overall in food. And we have many retailers in the US that are either started to move that way in the US, but certainly if they were owned by a European company, they were testing out those prototypes. So, you know, despite scientific assurances that COVID-19 is not, there's no evidence that it's transmitted by food, you have to wonder if there will be a demand for more display-ready packaging to address the kind of perceived contamination concern. I think we'll see a lot. We were already moving towards in produce, more convenient items. I mean, we really are competing against the snack aisle. It's the carrot against the kind bar. And you have started to see in produce, and that's part of the SKU proliferation is the convenience items. But now, post-pandemic, what's going to happen with packaging as it relates to safety?
I've talked to specialty retailers who have said to me that, you know, Kevin, we just delighted in these gorgeous big bulk presentations of everything you can imagine. It was spectacular and theatrical, and now everything's wrapped in plastic, and it just feels wrong to them. I mean, they understand they realize why they have to do it, but it just feels like they're violating this core value that in terms of, you know, no, that's not the way we're supposed to do things, but they recognize they have to do it. What I don't think they have any sense of, I don't know if you, I mean, I don't think anybody does at this point, is how long is this going to last? Is this going to be something that 5 years from now, we're going to see the same thing? And I think in Europe, I remember, I used to see stuff that was more wrapped in plastic than you'd ever seen.
That's right.
And I have to wonder. And it was funny. I was in the store the other day, and I needed some peppers, and I bought them wrapped. They had them both ways, and I don't know why I did, but I bought the wrapped kind.
Yeah. So we're fighting a narrative that's not true. That's what's so disheartening. So you bought peppers that were wrapped. I had an argument with my doctor because he wouldn't buy avocados because other people had touched them. I said, first of all, there's been absolutely no evidence that COVID-19 is transmitted through food. And so he's worried about other people touching the avocados, and he's going to touch the avocado. And how that would even have to transpire blows even logic of someone with COVID-19 having to transfer it to someone that picks up an avocado. And yet, I get it. Consumers have to react to retailers have to react to the consumer concerns, but let's react to things that are, let's eat more fruits and vegetables because it's going to build up our immune system. Let's not buy packaged peppers because that's not good for the environment, first of all.
Well, but you know what it is? I wonder if also people, and I don't know if they think differently or not, I think I would react differently for, let's say, a banana. Because even if somebody else reaches out and touches the banana, I'm never going to eat that skin, right?
Yeah.
So it's protected. A pepper, on the other hand, I am eating what they might be touching. And by the way, I'm not worried about them touching. I'm really worried about them sneezing on it, because all the idiots in the store who still aren't wearing masks. I'm more worried about them than I am about somebody, hopefully people are washing their hands, and I'm going to wash it before I use it anyway.
So we can move off this because we could debate this all day, but that person would have to sneeze, put it all over the pepper. You would have to pick it up in some, I guess, immediate point of time, put your hands all over it, put your hands in your face in order for that transference to happen. And there's still no evidence that that's happened.
All right, I won't buy packaged peppers anymore, I promise.
Good, you're doing your part in sustainability.
I should never admit these things. So as we should wrap this up, because I have other things to do than to talk to me. As you kind of talk to your members and sort of look at it with both your association executives hat also, but also somebody who's got vast experience as a retailer, when you see a place where you think disruption can happen, where you see an opportunity to just turn things totally on their head, and really affect change, what would it be? Is there something that just grabs your attention that you say, man, that's gonna be a priority?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the e-commerce disruption has already been happening. and you're going to see that accelerating. And again, what's good for retailers, especially those that have online and offline, is it's now found that if you can get a consumer to purchase from you 4 or 5 times on your e-commerce platform, then they're now establishing a level of trust for you. And what does that mean in terms of all the things we just talked about, Kevin, actually packaging, assortment, recipes? What is my basket going to look different post COVID-19 than pre-COVID-19, because I'm going to be a more educated, trained shopper. So, I think e-commerce will continue to expand. I think those organizations that were already looking at that and doing that, they're seeing the acceleration of that. I think there will be some, I'm not sure it's a disruptor, but it's clear advancements around the last mile. I also think that from our industry perspective, it's not a disruption, Kevin, but rather doing more of what our industry knows how to do best. The ecosystem of finding buyers and sellers and making sure that that process is fluid, no matter whether we're in a crisis or not. We need to expand the market pool and build the infrastructure for long-term success. So if every shop kitchen has refrigeration and the means to buy produce, they would never be without it. And you can do that for-profit business, but you can also look at the nonprofit space. I mean, the challenge with food banks right now is not all of the 200 food banks across the country have refrigeration. And that's why they're getting macaroni and cheese and Chef Boyardee, spaghetti, when the most important thing the consumer should be eating right now, regardless of your age, is fruits and vegetables. So we have some systemic issues that we need to take care of as a country to ensure that there's no disruption across the supply chain at any point. And our system isn't built for that yet. So that's to be continued.
So if the country were going to set up, here's a project, right? So if the country were going to try and develop a healthier, to improve the health of people who are food insecure, one of the first things they could do is buy a decent sized refrigerator for every food bank in the country.
Yep, I would put refrigeration at every food bank in the country.
It's got to be a way to get an equipment company or a coalition of equipment companies to come together to make that happen.
Yeah, or funders to be able to do it. I mean, right now, you can use empty warehouse space of private companies. I mean, you could use convention center refrigeration spaces or stadiums. I mean, we got plenty of stadiums with a lot of refrigeration. So there's ways that we can cobble together, hotels, cobble together to do it on a smaller scale. But to address the system.
Right, that's for this situation.
That's correct.
We're talking long term.
That's right. So I'm saying that can be the solve for today, but systemically, we have got to create an infrastructure that includes refrigeration at every food bank that can ensure that people are getting healthy, nutritious food. Because, I mean, the disease states, I mean, you know what's happening with obesity and diabetes, and quite frankly, this pandemic is not helping any of that, as people are eating more, and sometimes the bad comfort food as opposed to just filling half their plate.
The country's going to end up they're either going to be in Weight Watchers or Alcoholics Anonymous by the time this is over, maybe both.
Right. And we have part of the solution. Eat more fruits and vegetables.
The same argument. It's not that there's going to be a baby boom. There's also going to be a divorce boom. All over. So, to go back 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm not out there for the Morning News Beat audience, right? You're going to watch this. You're going to somebody come up with a solution for how we get refrigeration in every food bank in the country. That we're going to take that on as a Morning News Beat challenge.
Fantastic. Create a coalition.
Somebody will come up with an idea. I'm not smart enough, but I have a lot of smart readers and viewers.
And they will make a huge difference in the health of America. If they want to make a difference in the health of America, children on up, that would be an incredible, incredible gift to our country.
Last question. So you're imagine a day where once again, you're standing in front of an audience, right? Who knows when? And all of your members are in the room. and you were looking at them and you wanted to say, okay, here's the one thing I hope you learned from the pandemic, what would that be?
The first thing that comes to mind is produce is not an item people can and should live without. Every company and the industry needs to build in alternatives to get all product through the supply chain, but not just to fill customer orders, but into the mouths of the consumers. So consumption is not just selling to the outlet. So from my perspective, what I would say is we can never scramble for a duct tape solution again. We need alternative networks. The product is too perishable, margins are too thin, and the consumer need is too great not to fix it systemically forever.
Well, if there's one piece of good news out of all this, it's that I do think that we come out of this, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or God help us longer than that, with a new appreciation for and a new definition for what essential means, right? And I think that I mean, that's your sweet spot, right? I mean, you are essential.
We are.
And the challenge remains then how do you sort of build on that in a way that is not just of the moment, but of a greater sort of continuum.
Yeah, and if you think about resilience and agility and setting up our ecosystem to thrive, there is nothing more important for everyone around the world to experience the joy of fresh. I take that responsibility very personally. We do at PMA, and I know we have an industry that gets up every morning thinking about how can I bring the joy of fresh to the consumer in a way that's efficient, effective, innovative, creative, and nutritious. And that's the game that we will not rest on our laurels. We will not rest on our laurels until we make a significant impact in terms of creating a healthier world.
Well, listen, Cathy, I really appreciate you spending some time with me and with the Morning News Beat audience. I wish you good luck at all the things you're talking about. I hope we can revisit this down. I hope a couple of months from now we're back in closer to our regular lives, but if not, hopefully we can do this again. Stay healthy. I hope your family, your members, your staff stay healthy, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Same to you. It's always a pleasure to be with you.